Hello fellow coffee botherers, in this video I'm going to be giving hopefully a really clear guide on how to successfully switch over to freshly roasted coffee beans. What quite a lot of people are doing, as I know from the emails and comments I get, is switching over to freshly roasted coffee beans after quite some time using mainstream coffee beans with a sell by date but no roasted on date. So what makes this difficult, or more difficult than it probably should be? 1. You've probably been using the wrong baskets. If you're using a portafilter espresso machine and you're using coffee beans that aren't freshly roasted, this is what dual-walled or pressurised baskets are for. Many people hear that traditional single-walled baskets are best, so they use them, and for supermarket beans, what this means is that you'll often end up grinding very fine if you're achieving a 25 to 30 second shot time. This is very common for people using the Barista Express, for example, and other machines that come with both types of baskets. The single-walled, non-pressurised baskets are only the best when you use them with freshly roasted coffee beans. 2. Using freshly roasted beans requires a lot more precision. You don't have much control over the way normal, mainstream coffee beans taste. These kinds of beans, due to how they're roasted, tend to taste pretty much how they taste, regardless of what you do with them, to a certain extent at least. This isn't true at all for freshly roasted coffee beans. While you might find that most shots using normal beans are if you get a well-extracted shot with fresh beans, it might taste like If you get a badly extracted shot with fresh beans though, it might taste like King Kong's butt crack. Not that I know what King Kong's butt crack tastes like. Understanding the variables. There are lots of variables to espresso, meaning the things that we can change to hopefully improve things. Most people think about grind size, but that's just one of the variables. I'm not going to make this really complex by trying to get you to do anything with all of these variables. All I'm suggesting is that you know about them, so you can make sure you're not changing any of them without realising, as this is what most people do, and it makes things overly complicated and frustrating. Dose weight means the weight of the ground coffee in the basket. Dose volume means the height of the coffee in the basket and therefore the available space above it, which we call head space. Brew temperature, the temperature of the water entering the group. Shot weight or brew ratio, which are one and the same unless you change the dose weight. Grind size or shot time, which again are one and the same, meaning that we adjust the grind size in order to adjust the shot time. 3. You might be using your fresh beans too soon. Using your beans too close to the roast date isn't a problem you'll have with normal coffee beans without a roasted on date. But for fresh beans, particularly for espresso, using them too close to the roast date can cause issues, and it does depend on the beans too. Some will benefit from a longer rest time than others. Coffee beans degas after roasting, just meaning they're releasing CO2, and if you use them while they're still in the earlier stage of degassing, it can make your beans less forgiving to dial in, basically. It's a bit more complex than that. I don't want to make this video overly complex. Basically, if you use beans that haven't had time to rest, you might find you just can't get dialed in and your shots taste weird regardless of what you do. So the answer to this is simply to buy your freshly roasted beans before you run out, so you can wait until they've had a bit longer to release their CO2. The general consensus for resting time is somewhere between 1 to 2 weeks from roast date is ideal. It does depend on the beans. Personally, I find chocolate brownie blend, for example, is fine to use only a few days from roast date. The new Seaworks Dark Chocolate and Hazelnut Brazil, our latest addition to the range, I find benefits from a slightly longer rest. About 10 days I find is a sweet spot with these beans. Speaking of which, maybe it's time to have a word from our sponsor. This week it was supposed to be a leading mattress company, but they decided to sleep on it. So instead, this week's sponsor is me. My coffee from seaworks.co.uk is all freshly roasted, and we have a range of 20 different coffee beans, including quite a few that are really forgiving and perfect for beginner home baristas. One in particular that is incredibly forgiving is, completely coincidentally, Dark Chocolate and Hazelnut Brazil. If you want to try this, and obviously you do, just use the discount code YT25 at seaworks.co.uk for 25% off your first order and get a kilo of this amazing stuff for just under £21. Bargain. Now let's make coffee. So let's say I've been using beans without a roasted on date with standard baskets and I've been achieving a 25 to 30 second shot time. I know that's going to be a fine grind, so if I don't change that, here's what happens. Choked. So the first thing I'll do is to make a preemptive grind size adjustment. I'm using a very fine grind here as I've been using not fresh beans via standard baskets, so I'm going to make a big preemptive adjustment coarser. I'm not showing you what grind size I'm using because when I do this it confuses people into thinking they should be using the same grind as me with the same beans and the same machine. And unfortunately it's not that simple as all machines go out with different calibration. What I will say is that on the Barista Express I've gone
6
settings more coarse. If you're using the same beans, for example going from one freshly roasted medium to dark roast espresso blend to another, you can just leave the grind size where it is and go from there. But if you're switching over to a big difference in roast profile or switching from fresh to not fresh or not fresh to fresh, you can make a relatively big preemptive adjustment. You won't necessarily get it right with the first guess, but it's all part of the fun. The next thing I'm doing is purging. Purging coffee means grinding some coffee and chucking it. You could chuck it in the bin or you could add it to your compost bin if you have one, as plants love it. It seems like a waste, but if you don't do that, some of the grounds in the basket will be the old beans due to exchange retention, meaning beans entering the basket from the last time you ground, or ground beans entering the basket from the last time you ground, I should say. Unless you're using an almost zero retention grinder like the Niche Zero or DF54, DF64, etc., Eureka Oro Mignon, in which case the retention is tiny, so no need to bother. Next, I'm adjusting the grind amount, and you'll notice I'm also using scales so I don't need to guess the shot weight. The timer is good once you know how long it takes to get the desired dose weight at the grind size you're at, but without scales you're just guessing. Grinders grind faster at coarser grind settings, plus because the particles are bigger, the same weight of coffee takes up more space in the basket. So if you're dosing purely by grind time and you don't adjust this when changing the grind size and you don't use scales, you're going to be changing the dose weight, which will also have an impact on the brew ratio. Also, if we don't adjust how much we grind, we'll end up with a bigger dose volume, meaning a taller puck with less headspace above it. Increasing the dose volume as a side effect of grinding coarser can have the same impact as grinding finer. Tricky, this espresso malarkey. So just keep in mind that you need to tweak the grind time as you adjust the grind size to try to keep the dose weight and also the dose volume from changing too much. When it comes to dose volume, all I'd say there is keep an eye on how deep into the basket your tamper usually sits. If you've changed the grind size and now your tamper is sitting much higher, you might be overdosing the basket, which could give you weird results. If you think you've overdosed the basket and you have a Sage or Breville machine with the razor tool, you can use that to check. It's sitting in just slightly more. So once you're used to, right, that's how it should look. If it looks like that, then oh, I've overdosed. If it's like in like that, then you could think, oh, I've underdosed. As long as you weigh your coffee after you've trimmed it, then you can always make sure you're getting your desired ratio. So if you trimmed it and now you've got 18 grams, like I've just done, we now know to aim for 36 grams if you want the 1:2 ratio. Simple. Next, I'll reprogram the shot weight. Now I'm adjusting, because I've gone coarser, if I'm using the timer rather than using scales, I'll go a bit less. If you're using a machine like the Sage or Breville Duotemp Pro, Gaggia Classic or Rancilio Silvia, you're always pulling shots manually. If you're using a machine with volumetric shot buttons, like most integrated grinder machines do, this means it'll have a single and double shot button with preset volumes that you can adjust. This dictates the input volume, the amount of water pumped into the group, not the output volume, meaning the weight of espresso. The weight of espresso will depend on how much water is retained in the puck, and this will change when you change beans and change grind size. So the only way you can use shot buttons to deliver a set shot weight is to reprogram it when you've changed your beans and or grind size. Yeah, so on the Barista Express, you press and hold program. On the Barista Pro and the Bambino Plus, you press and hold the two buttons. But on this one, you press and hold program. Then when you press a shot button, you're reprogramming that button while pulling the shot. So when you press it again to stop, it'll use that same volume of water going forwards. So just brew in programming mode until you're happy with the shot, and then continue to use the shot button normally after that until you're changing beans and or grind size again. And then press the shot button. And press it again when you reach your desired shot volume, shot weight. 30, 26, 27 seconds. If you don't do this and you always just press the shot button, the shot weight will be different as you're adjusting things, so you'll have another sneaky variable changing and having a knock-on effect on everything else. Some people also get confused about the shot buttons by thinking it's the buttons that are supposed to control the shot time, but that's not true either. Shot time is determined by the pressure in the basket, which is controlled by the grind size when you're using standard unpressurized baskets. And there you go, hopefully a helpful guide on how to successfully switch over to freshly roasted coffee beans.
Coffee Cave comment of the week!
Simply PSI commented on the Great Mockapot comeback video. I would love for you to turn back the clock, Kev, and become a cool cat and make a video on brewing with a good old-fashioned percolator.
Kev, you know what you need to do? Call Radu.
Time machine. Radu, I've got a special project for you. Before signing off, I'd just like to shout out our new members. Thank you so much for becoming official Coffee Borrowers. You're personally helping us to grow the channel. If you want to become a member, click the join button below the video. Members get early access to videos, a community area, fun emojis, and more coming soon. Cheers! Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, drop us a like as it really helps. If you want more coffee content, click my face to subscribe. Tatty Bye!